This is the Calling the Shots podcast in association with Calling the Shots magazine, the newest and hottest website for multi-sports media in the UK. Calling the Shots.
Hello, welcome to episode 1 of the Calling the Shots podcast. Obviously, due to the current circumstances, we're not in the studio today, but nevertheless, I'm joined by Saul Kiloh in an online call. How are you, Saul?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to be doing this, you know? It's just a shame we can't see each other in the studio and see that lovable face of yours, you know?
It is a shame, but eventually we'll be back. But in the meantime, we've got a lot to talk about today, so we're going to hop straight into some football discussion. Eredivisie and League One have already voided their seasons. What are your thoughts on that?
Obviously, you know, first of all, I'd just like to say it's a perfect time to, you know, start a sports podcast when lots of sports aren't even on. But
yeah, poor timing.
Obviously, during this is an unprecedented event, right? Obviously, everyone knows that, uncertain times and all that. But I just don't get on with the choice to void the league, you know? Because like we played so much out of the season. We were like 2/3 away through, like we were almost done. Like all these leagues had like 8-9 games left. So to void it, especially like how early those leagues did, it doesn't sit right with me, you know?
I suppose the biggest counter argument to voiding the season is that there's many teams that had easier fixtures. So if you were gonna take the opposite route and say take current standings and use that as the finishing league table, that's not quite fair either, because teams with easier fixtures might have been able to make an advance, whilst teams that had easier fixtures previously will obviously gain the upper hand. So if you're not for avoiding the season, then what is your solution to finishing the season?
I mean, I think the solution is not a great answer, but I would just like wait. Like we just have to wait and see kind of how this plays out in the longer term. I don't see why they have to take action so early, because like if the goal is to start next season on time, I don't see that happening. First of all, really, in all honesty, although it is possible, I would prefer the emphasis be on all finishing the current season, because it just seems weird to void it. Especially, I agree more with the, you know, giving it on points per game basis, because at least it's not acting like all those games just never happened and they didn't matter at all, because then why did we put all this time into it? And
yeah.
It's avoiding the season I'm completely against, and I would have rather just wait until it was possible to finish this season.
Yeah, that's a fair take. That's a fair take for sure. Having said that, the Bundesliga have kind of taken the opposite route, and they are already back with post-quarantine games, obviously behind closed doors, no fans. And they played their first few games the other day. How did you find that? Did you watch any of that?
So I watched the Borussia Dortmund Schalke match, which was a good match to return to. Yeah,
definitely.
It was obviously,
and an interesting experience with no fans. You know, I kind of wanted to go off on a little tangent here and just talk about that, because I've found that with all the sports that I've been watching since quarantine started, there's only been a few that have been back, obviously, but the fact that there's no fans is like completely changed the experience of what it is to watch sports, and for me, in like quite a refreshing way. Like to hear all the communication, to hear the trash talk, you know, to hear like the sounds of the ball being kicked or punches landing or whatever, is like a really interesting experience, and like something that I'm not used to as a sports fan. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. Like when I was the same when I was tuning in. I was like, is this gonna be weird? Is it gonna feel the same? What's the atmosphere gonna be like? But then when it started, it almost like I kind of forgot that there was no crowd there. Like it didn't even impact on my watching experience that much. And I agree with you. Like hearing the sounds of the players and like people shouting on the bench, and you know, each pass, like you can hear each pass and each touch of the ball. It was so interesting, and I almost kind of enjoyed it more. But I'm not sure. I might just be saying this because I'm so starved for sport. But it didn't bother my watching experience as much as I thought it would have.
Yeah, as I say, as a television viewer, maybe preferable. But yeah, that was a good experience, and I'll look forward to more of that. But
here,
Sorry, go on.
It was just obviously I watched the Dortmund game, and first of all, there's a really fun team, and they played really well in that game.
Yeah, brilliant performance.
I found it especially funny with Dortmund because obviously Dortmund are kind of renowned for having one of the most like loud and passionate fan bases in all of Europe and all of football, to be honest. And they have a huge stadium that can hold over like 80,000 people. So I found it especially kind of weird to watch them at home with like no fans at all.
yeah. They're a very fan dominant club. So yeah, that was I agree, that was unusual, especially.
I also have a little pitch right here. Tell me what you think about this. So you know how obviously we can have fans, and I'm not sure how long it's going to be until fans get back. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Sorry, but I have a pitch, right? So obviously the clubs they're going to be losing a lot of money because of no fans. So I've got a pitch that just one single fan is allowed to attend each game. They do like a lottery or an auction bid for this one fan to get a game. Maybe they give him a signed ball as well, and then you just hear that one fan cheering throughout the game. And you can keep him safe. The security should be able to handle him from a distance. If he kicks off, hopefully he won't kick it off.
That's an interesting idea. That is an interesting idea, and actually, I was going to talk about that a little later because I actually read an article about the fact that the NBA might be bringing back fans, but only at 25% capacity, so they can social distance them within the arena, which is kind of going along the similar idea to what you were saying. But yeah, that would be an interesting idea, and
I think mine makes for a more fun watching experience, though.
yeah. Maybe one on each side of the stadium, 4 fans. They get a stand for themselves.
They just run wild.
Anyway, onto the Premier League, because obviously that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today. If they follow government allowances, they'll likely be returning in early June, behind closed doors. Like first of all, is that right? Because there's been a lot of kind of controversy around this. A lot of current players in the Premier League kind of coming out and saying, on one side they'd love to be back, but on the other side they just don't feel it's safe yet. And when the rest of the world isn't kind of returning to normality quite yet, why should they be subjected to anything different? Now, do you kind of agree with that, or is that something you'd kind of prefer to see happen anyway?
So yeah, you can obviously understand where the players are coming from. This is obviously unprecedented, and it's dangerous for all these people. They don't want to. A lot of them will have families and loved ones who are at the more at-risk categories, and they probably don't want to put them at risk.
Yeah.
And they're right. Like, loads of other people in other fields aren't going to be forced to work. And just because people want to watch sports and to save some TV revenue, they want the Premier League to maybe come back before it's safe, at least in the UK. So I can definitely understand where the players are coming from.
Yeah, me too. But I as much as the media is kind of portraying the idea that a lot of players are against it, generally from what I've seen on social media at least, most players are pretty for returning. So I don't know. I've heard that they're going to hold a lot of player manager conferences to find out what the general consensus of the league's players are. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it fell in favour of the players actually preferring to come back anyway. So regardless, if we do come back in early June, obviously top 6 still hangs in the balance. There's a load of alteration that could happen in those kind of places in the league table. Who gets top 6 and, even more importantly, top 4 for you?
Well, first of all, we have to talk about the race for first. Who's going to come first? It's a hotly contested battle. Liverpool, just slight favourites to come in first. So,
yeah.
I think I'm more confident in them. And if it does return, Liverpool probably maintain on that first position they're in right now.
I don't know. It'll be a tight one. But
you think Man City can come back?
Yeah, I found that really funny though. Like, obviously they've had such an incredibly dominant season this year, when this all kicked off and the league got cancelled, it was honestly quite funny as an opposing fan to watch Liverpool fans just completely melt down after having a year this good to potentially lose out on getting a title they've been waiting for so long was quite funny, I must admit. But yeah, they've been so good that I did feel a little bit bad for them at the same time, and I'm kind of happy for them that the league's kind of coming back for them.
It has to be the biggest impact on that curse that's been put on them, because literally an unprecedented event in modern times has come in and tried to stop them from winning a league.
It's just
a strong curse that was put on them.
They're just a club full of bad luck. Like, I mean, you even go back a couple of years, you think about when they almost won the league a few years back, but obviously Gerrard slipped and they lost on the last day. Then you think about their Champions League final against Real Madrid, and obviously Karius making all the mistakes that he did and pretty much single-handedly losing them the game. And then you think about this, it's like it's hard not to feel bad for them, even as an opposing fan. But yeah,
it's
obviously.
Funny, right?
Sorry, go on.
It's funny how Liverpool they're so dominant as a European team now with Klopp in charge, but they've still kind of got an underdog feeling to them. I don't know how they've achieved that.
Yeah, I think it's probably because they don't have like the incredibly. I mean, obviously they're a wealthy club. I'm not saying they're not, but they don't have like the kind of Saudi Arabian sheikh investment type feel to them. They include a lot of young talent in their. I mean, I say that, but actually, when you look at the starting 11, maybe not. But they're traditionally a club that's based on bringing up young talent from the ranks and integrating it into their first team. So maybe it's like they've got a small club vibe with a big club structure, if you will. But yeah, obviously they'll be getting the title if we come back.
Yes.
City, is City a cert for second place for you or not?
I mean, they're not a cert, but I do see them getting it, and they're comfortable favourites. They are by far still the best team other than Liverpool in the Premier League. They have the most quality within their squad. And yeah, I don't see anyone beating them off to second place. Yeah,
it's hard to see. I agree it's hard to say they're a cert, but when you have a squad that good, it's hard not to come first, but it's even harder not to come second. So yeah, for me, City will get third. As for the third and fourth spots, that's kind of where the debate kind of kicks off a little, because there's quite a few teams in contention for it. Who gets those two spots for you?
Well, if you look at the Premier League as it lies, you've got Leicester in third, and they're 5 points ahead of Chelsea in fourth, and then Manchester, Wolves, and Sheffield United follow them back. I don't see Leicester with a 5-point advantage. I don't see anyone beating them out for third, especially with how many games are left. It's only 9, and a 5-point advantage.
You say that though, but they did start to take a kind of considerable downturn towards the end of the season before we stopped there. Like, they weren't that kind of flair and fast-paced football they were playing in the first half of the season was kind of fading. Like, I was really thinking that they were kind of losing that spark they had. Do you not agree with that?
Yeah, I understand that, but I think you're forgetting that everyone else in contention is also worse. So I don't know. I don't see anyone being Leicester there for third.
I mean, maybe they're worse when you take a snapshot of the season as a whole. But when you look at how the teams were playing when the league stopped, Manchester United, a team that played pretty poorly for the first half of the season, were actually playing like quite decent football towards the end. Arsenal, like as much as people take shots at Arsenal, people forget they were unbeaten in 2020. That's ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? If someone had said that about Emery's Arsenal last year, people would have laughed in your face. But to go all of 2020 unbeaten is actually quite impressive. So you could say that they were playing a bit more impressive football towards the end. Chelsea still playing kind of okay. So I mean, you say that Leicester were kind of at an advantage in terms of the football they're playing, even after taking a downturn. But I don't know if that's true.
Well, in my opinion, I think Leicester are going to get third. The point advantage, they have such a massive goal difference advantage as well. They have 18 more than Chelsea and 16 more than Man United. So I think with the current points advantage and that goal difference advantage, I think they put themselves in a position, even if they're not playing at the top when it ended. I think they put themselves in a position to claim that third place.
Okay, fair enough. And the fourth spot, who does that go to?
See, the fourth place is when everything gets up for grabs. Because, right, so Chelsea and Man City, you got fourth, fifth, Chelsea, Man City, Man United, sorry. And then there's I would say it goes, everyone up until Arsenal up in ninth is probably in contention. I would say Tottenham, they're out, let's be honest. The fitness problems really impacted them, and as much as I love Mourinho, he's not really at the top of his game anymore, let's be honest.
Mourinho's definitely not at the top of his game, but in terms of the fitness problems you talked about, I've heard that Kane and Son could potentially be back when the league returns. So, that might alter the situation a bit.
It does, yeah. It depends when the season does return, and if they are fully fit, then Tottenham will be more of a contender. But I don't know, I just don't see them doing it. Arsenal, maybe win some games, stop drawing some games, and you can give me a call. The contention for fourth place is between Chelsea, Man United, Wolves, and Sheffield United, alright? Those are my four contenders. And I'm going to be really boring and say that Chelsea are going to hang on to fourth.
No, I can see that. They've been fairly consistent this season, I think, which is surprising because of how young their squad is. But yeah, I've been quite impressed by the kind of football that Frank Lampard's got them playing.
Especially with Frank Lampard also being an inexperienced manager. But fourth is really a toss-up.
Yeah, it is. And also, we should mention that depending on how the court case for Manchester City's place in the Champions League goes, fifth place might actually be a Champions League spot now. So all the teams you just mentioned there, they're not just gunning for fourth anymore. They've got two spots to gun for, which will make it all the more interesting when it does come back. But Sheffield
United in fifth, come on. Lane in the Champions League.
You know what?
Boys, Chris Wilder.
For any listeners listening, if you didn't know already, I'm a die-hard Arsenal fan. But if Arsenal weren't to get one of those spots, I'd love to see Sheffield get in there. I think that would be so entertaining to see Sheffield United play Real Madrid in the Champions League.
And you know what? It'd be a 0-0 draw.
Yeah.
Real Madrid players again close to a goal.
You're damn right.
Chris Wilder.
You're damn right.
A Chris Wilder masterclass in the Bernabeu.
Yeah, what a sight that would be.
There's 8 players in the box. What do we do? I've never seen this.
You know what? We can make jokes about that, but that would be interesting to see how a club like Real Madrid would deal with that, because I don't think they come up against teams that play like that ever. So it'd be a change of scenery to them. Anyway, just before we finish up on football, I'd like to ask one last question. As you said earlier, this is going to have some major implications in terms of finances, especially for smaller clubs, obviously, because they don't have the huge sponsorship deals, the other things to tide them over. So for you, what do you think the long run implications for this will be? I'm not talking like this season and next season, but I'm talking about maybe the next 10 years or indefinitely. What do you see the impact being?
Well, I think in the short term there are a lot of uncertainties that we have to find out and wait answers to. But one thing I found interesting in all this talk about the impact this might have is the introduction, possibly. People have just been discussing this. I don't think it will happen, but of a salary cap similar to the kind of thing we see in American sports such as the NBA and the NFL. Because of how much of a financial impact this has had on clubs and will be for a while, especially due to the loss of attendance revenue, which is a huge part of this football business for many clubs. Like, this is going to be a massive impact on these clubs. And a lot of these clubs, they've spent so much over their station. This can be especially true for kind of lower teams in the English Championship, for example, who spend more than they can actually afford to try and make it to the Premier League.
Yeah, so, it's almost an investment in the future that they hope to eventually make back when they make it.
Exactly, and with this being such a financial loss, clubs like that are going to be they're going to be screwed basically. So some people have discussed if they'll look to maybe implement something like that to make sure these clubs don't go past their financial means in a which is especially important when something like this happens that, just destroys it unforeseeably.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I also think there'll be a big difference in how teams operate in the transfer market as well. Obviously, the Mbappes, the Hazards, the Ronaldos, the Messis, they feel unlikely to be moving now, just because the price tags on those players pre-pandemic was already ridiculous. But I don't know how clubs will be able to afford anything over like 10, 15 million now, even the biggest clubs. So yeah, that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how teams operate in the transfer market. I think there'll be a real dip in business for the next few years in terms of buying and selling players. But that's all we've got time for football, and we'll be back after this ad read. Discover your destiny with Council Crisis, the first RPG from Luchadraft Games. Explore the misfit island of Wilverig as Junior, a young boy who craves adventure. Fight exciting battles with a classic RPG combat system as Junior gets involved in a mysterious plot that centres around the incompetent Council of Nine, who have left the helpless citizens of Wilverig to fend for themselves. Featuring a classic story with colourful and unique characters, check out Luchadraft Games on social media to find out how to play for free. That's Luchadraft Inc. on Twitter and Instagram, and Luchadraft Games on Facebook. Again, that's Luchadraft Inc. on Twitter and Instagram, and Luchadraft Games on Facebook. Only you can save Wilverig. And we're back. And we're back for some boxing and UFC talk, which is always good. Obviously, UFC 249 took place just last Saturday. Justin Gaethje v Tony Ferguson. A brilliant fight, actually. Loved every second of it. Also, a quick shout out to Ngannou, the beast. What a knockout that was. I actually saw a video of Ngannou talking to Mike Tyson, which was pretty interesting. Mike Tyson was showing him how to knock out Tyson Fury. I don't know why, but it was entertaining nonetheless.
Did you see that Mike Tyson clip?
Yeah, he's potentially returning to boxing, apparently.
No, that's a story, man.
Yeah, that's...
he looked good in that.
Isn't that bizarre?
He looked good in that 5-second clip, but yeah, that is quite...
Yeah, he did look good. And even weirder, he's potentially lining up a fight with, do you know Shannon Briggs, the Let's Go Champ guy? You know, the Let's Go Champ?
Yeah. Let's go, champ.
Yeah, apparently he might be lining up a fight with him, which will be mad. Like, that might be one of the most watched fights of all time.
What's the record of boxers boxing into their 50s? Has there been many of them?
Yeah, I mean that might be one of the oldest fights of all time.
I'd like to see him
take on
see him take on Tyson Fury's dad. That's who I want to see.
Oh yeah, he's a nutter. He's a real nutter.
That'd be some trash talk for of the century right there.
It would be. But let's get off this tangent, because I know we could go for Michael's talking about this, but we actually do have some things scheduled to talk about. So yeah, back to UFC 249. Obviously behind closed doors again, which was awesome, because as we were saying about football and hearing the sound of touches and the sound of the communication on the pitch and stuff, this was even more extraordinary, because it was like you get to hear the bones crack and the smack on people's faces and stuff, which was just like it was entertaining, but also a little bit jarring, because it was like you realize how much brute force these guys can take on a nightly basis, which is kind of scary, but yeah, entertaining nonetheless. It was an incredible fight. Justin Gaethje was extraordinary. Like, I always knew he was a good striker, but that was like kind of him cementing himself as like one of the best, maybe if not the best striker in the division, which was great. And Tony Ferguson, well, he looked a little bit off in terms of his fighting. I don't know if I've ever seen a single man take that much punishment in one fight and stay standing. It's like he got hit with maybe 10 or 11 punches that would have knocked most people clean out, and somehow he was standing by the end of the fight. It was incredible. It's like I've never seen something like that in my life. But did you watch the fight?
I saw the highlights, and you've just always got to commend these fighters for the serious body, like the risk they're putting their bodies at in these contests. And as you said, like this this fight at UFC 249 was a prime example of it. It's astonishing, and it's really impressive how much punishment these guys can take, and not look as affected as 99.9% of people would.
Yeah, exactly. But as impressive as that was from Tony Ferguson, it kind of took him out of the conversation a little bit. While as before this fight, he was kind of being talked about in the top names of the division. Obviously, I mean, he was actually meant to fight Khabib in this fight, and Gaethje was his replacement after Khabib pulled out, which might have impacted a little bit. Obviously, Khabib's a kind of wrestling dominant fighter, so with Tony Ferguson preparing for a wrestler and then in turn getting like an elite striker, I can see why that might have kind of hampered his chances a little bit. But regardless, it was a pretty poor performance in terms of fighting anyway. So now we're looking at the top guys in that. I mean, it's not just that division, but it's like the division above and below that, because obviously fighters have been moving between those three a lot recently. So you've got the names like Justin Gaethje, obviously, Khabib, Conor McGregor, now back after his win against Cowboy. We've got Masvidal, Usman, all top fighters, and like fights between all of them will be really entertaining. I'd love to see Justin Gaethje v Conor, because to see two elite strikers would just be like something we've not seen in quite a while. It's been so like striker versus wrestler and striker versus jiu-jitsu and all that kind of stuff, but to see two elite strikers just fight it out would be really interesting. And obviously Conor's kind of back in his wave now, so that'd be great to see him come back. What are your thoughts on that fight maybe happening?
Yeah, it'd be a good fight. Obviously, I think most fights with Conor McGregor are going to be money and some more of the more anticipated fights with UFC. But I still think the main matchup I'd like to see is him versus Khabib in a rematch.
Who, Justin Gaethje or Conor McGregor?
Nah, Conor McGregor. I want the rematch. He has to get revenge for Khabib.
Yeah, I think all of those fights would be entertaining. It's like, I mean, yeah, as you said, any fight with Conor McGregor is just like the world watches. Do you know what I mean? It's like he kind of transcends the sport in a way.
Yeah, I think the division is also in a pretty good place, as you said. You gave a few examples there. It's got a number of strong contenders, so it should be makes for some nice fights in the future.
Yeah, I'll be excited to see that. And yeah, obviously UFC have been kind of on the forefront of bringing sport back post quarantine. So obviously Dana White's talked a lot about the fact that they want to be really proactive about bringing events. So we could be seeing some of these fights pretty soon, really, which is great, because as far as I know, it's been relatively safe with all the testing they've done and stuff, and it's obviously great entertainment for everyone watching at home. So yeah, that'll be good to see, and we'll be back with that next time. But I want to talk a bit about boxing as well. Wilder Fury 2 happened not too long ago in the early 2020. Fury obviously putting on a brilliant performance, and I mean, what could you say? Annihilating Wilder. It was like such a dominant performance.
Yeah, class him.
But
yeah.
He did confirm the rematch. There's going to be a rematch in 2020, Wilder Fury 3, which, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on it are, but I don't feel like anyone wants to see that anymore. And I mean, I can speak for myself, and I can say definitely I do not want to see that. It's done. So I mean, Fury won the first fight, even though it was called as a draw. Pretty much everyone agrees that he won the first fight. He definitely won the second fight, that's for sure. And it's like, it's done. They've done it. Move on. Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, my thoughts are the first fight was a draw. You can't just say Fury won when he didn't, even if he should have, but, he didn't by the rules. So, first of all, he didn't win the first fight. Second of all, we agree that Wilder was completely outclassed and outmatched in the second fight. But I'm going to completely disagree with everything you said. And while we're kind of in the same wave, as in, is the most exciting matchup? No, it's not. Obviously, the matchup people want to see is AJ Fury. But, Wilder does have a rematch clause, and he shouldn't just step aside because, what the fans want. He wants to get his title back and his chance of redemption.
That's fair enough, but I mean, what if he was maybe paid like a cancellation fee, and the fight was rescheduled? Would you feel that was a more fair act towards Wilder?
I guess it depends on what Wilder wants. If he wants to get, if he wants to kind of make up for how bad he was in the last fight, or if he just cares about the money. If he just cares about the money, sure. But if he wants to try and come back and put up a better performance and regain the title that he lost, then you gotta let him have the match. I mean, if he has the rematch clause in there, you can't just take it away from him because it's not the top matchup.
No, of course not. You can't take it away from him. Like, it's in the contract, it's legally binding, and if he enforces it, there's nothing anyone can do about it. But yeah, it's been quite funny because a lot of the promoters from other fighters have been kind of just asking him to politely step aside, which now that you say that does kind of bring up an interesting point, because from his point of view, it's like that would be a pretty absurd thing to do, to just let the titles go. But Fury v Joshua is what everyone wants to see, and I think that would be a great fight. I mean, for me, Wilder and AJ have kind of similar styles. They're both like big, heavy punchers. They're both knockout artists. Just AJ's a lot better at it for me. So to see AJ Fury would be like Wilder Fury 3, but a more equal matchup, which I'd love to see. What are your thoughts on that fight? Who wins that fight for you?
Who wins, Fury AJ?
Yeah.
It's a tough one. As you said, AJ is similar to Wilder. I would say Wilder maybe has a bit more power, and AJ is a little bit more proficient, technically. But I don't know. Fury was so impressive in that Wilder fight. He showed kind of a different side of his skill.
Yeah, definitely. That was really unusual, actually. Because we're so used to seeing that kind of hit and don't get hit style from Fury, and in the build up to that fight, he was obviously like trash talking as he always does. But part of that trash talk was him saying that after replacing his coaches and stuff, his goal was to kind of transition his game into being more of a knockout artist, which I kind of disregarded at first, thinking, oh, it's just pointless trash talk. It's what we're used to seeing from him. But after actually witnessing him play that out for real and seeing how effective it was, it makes for a really interesting matchup when he fights AJ, because for me, if he was to revert back to his old style, as much as I'm personally an AJ fan, and as much as I think AJ's a brilliant fighter, and I think I'd love to see him win, for me, if Fury was to revert back to his old style, he's by far the favourite, and he probably wins that fight on points. But if Fury goes in again with AJ with the kind of this new kind of knockout style, that would be really, really interesting, because we've only seen one fight of Fury adopting that kind of style, and it was good. So to see like both fighters looking for KO would be like unprecedented, and something that like no one could really call, because we've only got one fight to go off, and we don't know how that would interact with AJ. So yeah, for me, if he reverts back to his old style, Fury wins. If he doesn't, that's a real toss up for me, which makes it all the more exciting.
Yeah, I think it is a toss up. It's a tough one to call, because obviously they're probably two of the top boxers in the division right now. Obviously they're both champions, but as you said, it's hard to know if what style he goes for, if he sticks with the new one, if he goes to the old one, because especially in these big fights, you don't always see people like always going for it as much as they do in maybe smaller fights, because like they're just being conservative. They don't want to be made embarrassed. They don't want to be embarrassed on the big stage, and obviously it's best opponent, so maybe to play more defensively is more safe. But I hope he sticks with the new style, because not only did it look so good in that fight against Wilder, and I'm not sure if that's just because Wilder's not as technically proficient as some other boxers are, but he looked great.
As anyone, really.
Yeah, with his size and his power, Fury with that style, it makes sense to me, and that would make for a fun matchup.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, I think I would slightly favor Fury in a match, to be honest, from what I've seen recently.
Yeah, I'd say that's. I mean, yeah, the bookmakers will be favouring him, and I can see why. I can see why most people would, and I probably would as well. But just also to touch on what you said before about fighters not wanting to take risks in major fights, I think that's what made Fury taking that approach so impressive. Because obviously his fight against Wilder was a major fight. It was a huge fight, probably one of the biggest fights of this year. So to see him be like so I was gonna say careless, but obviously it's probably unfair to call it careless because it paid off. But to be him take such a risk in such a major fight was like, I mean, I can't think of any other phrase to say it. He's got balls. The guy's got balls, you know. So
He's got balls. It's refreshing to see because usually when fighters do that, it's kind of a letdown because you want to see him go for it and you want to see those fun combinations when they go at it. And for Fury to do that, take that risk, it was not only refreshing but obviously it worked out. So I think he'll stick with it to be in this fight.
yeah, definitely. And what makes
if and when it does happen.
yeah, definitely. But I think also what makes it so interesting is, while as before we were kind of just talking about these three in a trio of fights between AJ, Fury, and Wilder, now there's actually other fighters kind of coming into the equation, which makes it even more interesting. So you've got like Dillian Whyte, who's performed brilliantly on recent occasions, and I mean, it's a real injustice how long he's been waiting for a title shot without getting it. He's fought top opponent after top opponent waiting for his chance, and it's not been given to him. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Dillian Whyte fight one of those three soon, which I'd love to see. And obviously you've got the kind of veterans of the division, Povetkin, those kind of people, Pulev. So yeah, Mike Tyson, and Ruiz Jr. obviously, because I mean, after that whole AJ thing and then beating AJ, it's the hype's kind of died down after he lost the rematch, but that doesn't take anything away from that initial win against AJ. That was a stunning win, and he's still kind of a major player in the division, so it'll be interesting to see how he evolves and what kind of fights can be made with him in the future. Definitely. So
yeah.
But that's all we've got for boxing today. We'll be back after this short break for some NBA talk. If you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, then don't forget to check us out on our website for more hot takes on the Premier League, boxing and the UFC, the NBA and more. You can find us at callingtheshotsmagazine.wixsite.com/callingtheshots, or check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Calling the Shots Magazine. Calling the Shots, the newest and hottest online multi-sport magazine in the UK. And we're back for some NBA. Obviously, like everything else, the league's been off for a number of months now. But Adam Silver has had a call with a number of the players, and the general consensus was that they were, heavily in favour for finishing the season off. So Adam Silver has said that he will announce the decision as to whether or not the league will be coming back within the next 2 to 4 weeks. But for you, if they do continue with the season, do we go straight back into playoffs?
It's an interesting conundrum. I think from the NBA's perspective, in an ideal world, they'd like to finish the regular season just for multiple reasons. Mainly probably for max revenue, to get all the TV revenue they can, to make it the most fair it can be.
Right, yeah.
So each team has a chance to make the playoffs, and changing the different seeding order for the playoffs, and just so that an eventual winner of a championship doesn't have like a weird caveat next to their title just because the regular season didn't fully finish.
Yeah, I mean that's true. But given how bizarre this whole thing has been, there's always going to be a little asterisk next to whoever wins this year. But having said that, who do you think will have benefited and suffered most from this break? Because obviously, during this time off, players that have been injured have been able to come back. Players that were maybe on a roll before we broke off might have lost some momentum. Maybe, like, who do you think's benefited and who do you think suffered?
Thing about this break, like we've had such a long break right in the middle of the season, right as we were wrapping up into the playoffs. It could have such an unpredictable impact on many players. So we don't know how much they've been practicing, how much if players are taking it seriously. I'm interested if there's any players that have just completely slacked off, and they're just like, oh, we're coming back when? And I've had to really get into the cardio lately because they're having a few too many cheeseburgers. I'm excited to see who those kind of players are.
Right, yeah. I mean,
another reason they might want to have a regular season first, so a few of those players can play themselves into shape.
yeah, that's a fair point. But talking about that, I mean, that's obviously in reference to who will have suffered the most. But in terms of who's benefited the most, I guess one of the obvious prospects is Brooklyn. Obviously, with KD and Kyrie potentially being back by the time we reach playoffs. Do you think they will be back? And if so, do you think they've got any chance at making like a deep playoff run?
The thing with Brooklyn, right, on the NBA injury report, so Kyrie was out with a shoulder injury, and it says he's not expected back until August, and then Kevin Durant with his Achilles tear obviously is not expected back until August as well. So I don't know, it depends when and if they resume play, like when the playoffs would fall in that timeline. I don't see it, especially not for KD. I don't think KD will risk coming back, especially when, in my opinion, the Nets still have no chance of winning anyway. So yeah, I don't think KD will come back. And if Kyrie does come back, I feel bad for the Nets because that will impact negatively on their chances of progressing further into the playoffs.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe not if he's got KD as his partner, but yeah, I can see the point you're making there. But I think another interesting look at who might have benefited from this will be the Lakers, because especially when you look at LeBron, it's his 17th year in the league now. Like he's really weathered. Yeah. So he's got a pretty battered body now, and he's like really weathering the storm. But he's one of those players where a long rest will do him good. While his players like kind of his rivals like Kawhi and those kind of players, they're younger, their bodies are more used to taking some long-term endurance. Maybe his isn't, so a break might do him some good. What do you think about that?
I think Kawhi is probably doing quite well with this as well, because obviously he's had his fair share of injury problems, and he's been load managing throughout the whole season to not put too much stress on his body. I think for LeBron, obviously, you said it's his 17th year. He's got a lot of minutes on his body, so I think this rest should be helpful. And another thing with LeBron is, during this time, he's not been one of the people slacking off. He's going to stay in tip-top shape, and he's going to be ready for the return whenever it comes.
Yeah, definitely. And for you, does that put Lakers in the predominant position to go in and go ahead and win?
When it comes back, the Lakers are still the heavy favorite in the West for me. I haven't seen quite enough from the Clippers yet, and I just don't think anyone else in the West is ready to really contend with the Lakers, especially with this being
the Rockets, maybe?
Rockets, get here. Anyway, back to the real contenders. Especially with this being one of the later chances for LeBron to win a title, he's going to be really motivated to do it, and I don't think when you have a motivated LeBron in tip-top shape, I'm just not sure I see anyone in the West that can truly contend with that.
Okay, fair enough. And who have you got in the East?
It's got to be the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that'll be quite easy for them as well. I don't see any serious contenders in there, really. Like, Toronto, I mean, they've done well this season in the regular season, but when it comes down to it, they just don't have the talent, and I think Boston is similar. They're just too young. And then maybe the other favorite players they're just not on the same level of talent as the Bucks in any respect, really. Like, they have a nice team, but I just don't think they're that caliber. And then maybe you think about Philly, but they don't play well enough together, and Embiid might be one of the people who's not been in tip-top shape because he wasn't in tip-top shape beforehand, so it's got to be the Bucks for me. Giannis, LeBron in the finals, and that should be a good one.
I want to quickly go back to that conversation about who could contend with the Bucks in the East, though, because I think a lot of people were thinking that the Bucks were just pretty much untouchable in that conference, but when the Heat put on that performance against them and beat them in the regular season, there was they turned some heads, and a few people began to think, actually, maybe, while they definitely have had a dominant season, there might be a potential weakness that could be exploited there, and maybe it won't be like a washout like everyone's thinking. Do you not think the Heat maybe have an advantage stylistically?
Put this lightly, I think the Heat have zero chance chance of defeating the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs. Like, literally zero chance. When it comes down to it, Giannis is just so much more... He's just the best player on the floor by far. He doesn't have a contender in terms of that, and that's usually how these things are decided. When it comes down to that clutch time, the last 2 minutes of the game, they've got Giannis and Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, while really good, nice all-star players, they're just not in the same league.
Okay, yeah, that's a completely fair analysis. Who do you see winning the final?
See, the finals is when it gets real tasty. The Lakers versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Both dominant in their own conferences. Giannis versus LeBron. The old guard versus the new guard. Can you tell I'm stalling? Because I don't know. I mean, the Bucks have home court, but I think I'd give the edge to the Lakers. Because I think, LeBron, he's going to be motivated. It's probably one of his last chances to do so, and if he really wants to get into that, greatest of all time conversation, one more would not hurt. And I think that just his experience will probably help him through, because obviously the Bucks have never made the finals before, so I'd go with the Lakers in a tight series. Right,
well that's interesting you said that about LeBron, because that actually leads us on to our next topic, which was ESPN, who released a list of the top 75 players of all time, in their opinions, obviously, and there's been a lot of controversy about this in terms of the order. I think generally people were agreeing with the names that are in the top 10, but the order is largely debatable. And as you said, LeBron is obviously still trying to make his stake for the greatest of all time. ESPN had him at number 2. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's entirely fair. First of all, it's obviously this is not finished because LeBron is still going at a super high level for the age he's at. So, it's not a finalized position in history. But I'm just not sure he can do much to pass Jordan at this point. He's just gone so long, and he's had more moments of failure than Jordan ever has. And I think the myth and legend of Michael Jordan, which is being held by the Last Dance documentary right now, I'm just not sure he can do too much to overtake it.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, Kendrick Perkins already had him at number 1, which I thought was pretty mad, given that his career's not even finished yet, and MJ's legacy.
If you want to have anything that discredits LeBron being put at number 1, it's Kendrick Perkins saying that he should be at number 1.
Yeah, you're right about that. It was an interesting point you made, because it kind of got me thinking. It really depends on how you rank this list, because if we're talking about accolades and career achievement, then I think this list is largely fair. But if you're talking about raw talent, I can understand a claim for LeBron to be at the number 1 spot.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and it's a thing that kind of comes up whenever these types of opinions or debate comes up, because just the evolution of man, the modern player is just more athletic. They're probably more skilled. So, is LeBron more skilled than Michael Jordan? Probably. But is his greatness better? And was he better in his era than Jordan was in his? So it's kind of hard to.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
This ranking echoing on.
Of course, the biggest distinguishing factor between the two that everyone talks about is the mindset. Obviously, MJ had that real killer mindset where he wanted to completely tear opponents to pieces, and LeBron is, I mean, he doesn't quite share that. He's a little bit more timid, I guess. But yeah, I can.
Yes, shown a little bit of it, but definitely not on the same level as MJ. So yeah.
Yeah, and also his career's not over yet, so he's still got time to prove it. But yeah, I guess those 2 spots are debatable. As for the rest of it, do you have any other changes you'd make to that list? I'll quickly go through it. They've got Shaq at number 10, Kobe at number 9, Tim Duncan number 8, Larry Bird at 7, Wilt Chamberlain at 6, Magic Johnson at 5, Bill Russell at 4, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at 3, LeBron at 2, and then MJ at 1. So do you have any changes to that list that you'd make?
See, these things are always so hard to do, because when you get to the top 10, all these players they're the greatest of the greats. They're the top 10 of all time. So it's thin margins, but to be honest, I don't see anything that I disagree with majorly in this ranking. I think everything's pretty solid to me. Maybe I'd consider Larry Bird over Wilt, but
Really?
Wilt has the statistics, but he wasn't like the same like winning player. Like he lost a lot to Bill Russell in the finals, which obviously Bill Russell is 11.
Yeah,
But,
he holds the record.
From a pure statistical perspective, then Wilt at 6 is completely fair. So, I think it's a pretty fair ranking.
That's quite interesting you say that, because I was going to make a little stake for Wilt maybe being higher up on the list. Because, again, it depends how you rank it. But when you look at the way he played, it was just like, he's the definition of on-court dominance. Other than Shaq, maybe, he's like, maybe the most dominant player of all time. And something I read the other day, which blew my mind, was that obviously the recordings are a bit shaky because it was so long ago and some of the stats are a bit out of whack. But I've read some articles that say that he potentially had the highest vert of all time at more than 50 inches, which is 2 inches above MJ, and he's 7'1". Like, just think about that. That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but the thing holding Wilt back and why he's only number 6 is while he was so physically dominant, he was probably the best player of his time, right? If you're talking from just a pure skill standpoint. But he only won 2 championships, and when it came to the important matches in the crunch times in the playoffs, Bill Russell outplayed him almost every time. And so Wilt only has 2 NBA championships, and Russell has 11. So I think that's kind of holding him back, and I think when you think about it that way, it's kind of understandable why he's that position.
Yeah, and not to take away from Bill Russell, because he holds his own fair share of incredible stats. Like, one I read the other day was that he averaged 22 rebounds a game throughout his career, which was pretty mad. So he's dominant in his own right. But yeah, fair enough. What about Kobe? There's been a lot of controversy about maybe him being higher up on the list. A lot of people, some people have him top 3. So, do you think there's any justification in maybe moving him up higher, or do you think 9 is fair enough?
You could move him up higher. As I said, it's thin margins when you get this high, and it's just like people emphasize have importance on different aspects, so that you could maybe move him up to 7 at most. I would say I can't see him going above 7, and I think 9 is fair.
As you said, this is such a debatable topic. There's like the margins are so fine, and it really could go either way. But I think that's where we'll leave it for today. As always, let us know your thoughts on the subject that we talked about today on our social medias, which are linked below. We've been Kai Plotnikoff and Saul Kiloh. This has been episode 1 of the Calling the Shots podcast. Keep posted for episode 2 on our socials coming soon. Yeah, until next time.
Calling the Shots.